In the sprawling emptiness of the Texas plains, a lonely rancher rode home, his thoughts as stark as the landscape. But what he found wasn't dust or silence. It was a cry, so small it barely registered, coming from his saddlebag. A baby. And then, as if the land itself was weeping, another sound reached him from behind the trees, a girl's broken sobs. What happened next changed everything, exposing a dark secret that threatened his life, challenged his very soul, and ignited a quiet fire of justice that the West had never seen. Silas Vance was almost home. The sun baked the dust into the cracked earth, making him feel older than his 50-odd years. He rode his sorrel, Old Buck, slow and steady across his endless Texas ranch. It was mostly just him and the land these days, a quiet arrangement. He'd been out checking the distant fences, a 3-day ride. The rhythmic creak of his saddle was usually the loudest thing out there. He reached the corral, the old wooden posts dark against the setting sun. Old Buck snorted, eager for water. Silas swung his leg over, his boots hitting the packed dirt. That was when he heard it. A small sound, almost swallowed by the vast quiet. He stopped, listening. It came again, a faint mewling, like a lost kitten. It seemed to come from his saddlebag, hanging heavy over Old Buck's flank. He moved closer, a strange prickle on his neck. He reached for the bag, untied the leather straps, and peered inside. His hand froze. Tucked amongst his clothes was a bundle of faded calico, and from that bundle a tiny red face looked up at him, its mouth open in a silent cry. A baby, no more than a few weeks old. Silas just stood there, hat tilted back, staring. His mind couldn't make sense of it. A baby, in his saddlebag, out here, miles from anywhere. He felt a cold knot form in his stomach, not from fear, but from the sheer unsettling wrongness of it all. Just as the shock settled, a different sound pierced the heavy quiet. It was soft, ragged, like a creature in pain, a child crying, not the baby's whimpers, but something older, full of real sorrow. It came from the clump of mesquite trees, no more than 20 yards from his corral. Silas's eyes snapped to the trees. He pulled his hand back from the saddlebag. The baby let out another weak cry. The sounds, one so helpless, the other so heartbroken, hung in the still air. His ranch, a place of order, had just exploded into a chaos of unexpected life and profound distress. Silas stood frozen, the baby's soft cries still echoing from his saddlebag, the other sobs raw and desperate from the mesquite trees. He was used to the company of horses and silence, now confronted with human distress on a scale he couldn't comprehend. He knew he had to move. He left Old Buck and the saddlebag near the corral gate, stepping quietly towards the mesquite. The small, ragged sobs grew louder as he approached. He pushed through the thorny branches, and there she was. A girl, small for her age, maybe 10 years old, huddled on the dry earth, her knees pulled to her chest. Her dress was torn, streaked with dirt, her bare feet looked raw. Her hair was a tangled mess, and her face, streaked with tears and grime, stared at him like a trapped animal. She tried to scramble back, pushing herself deeper into the thorny brush, whimpering low in her throat. Her body tensed, ready to bolt. Silas stopped, holding his hands open. "It's all right, girl," he said, trying to make his voice sound soft. "I ain't gonna hurt you." She flinched, pulling her head down, but her eyes never left him. Her breathing came in short, quick bursts. He took a slow step back, giving her space. "Got a baby back there," he continued, pointing vaguely towards the corral. "Found it in my saddlebag. Is it yours?" The question seemed to break through her terror just a little. Her eyes widened, focusing on his hand. She shook her head fiercely, then hesitantly nodded towards the corral. Her lips trembled. "Lily," she whispered, the word thin and reedy. My sister." She started to cry again, silent tears running down her grimy cheeks. Silas dropped his hand, a heavy weight settling in his gut. His sister. He saw the desperate protectiveness in her eyes. He realized she had likely hidden nearby, watching, waiting. He looked at her small, trembling frame, then back at the unseen baby. This was more than random abandonment. This was something deliberate, cruel. He knew he couldn't leave them out here. He extended a hand again. "Come on, then. She's safe with me. We'll go to the house." The girl, Clara, still hesitated, but her gaze lingered on his outstretched hand, then back to the corral, then to the silent baby. Her need for her sister slowly outweighed her fear of the stranger. Clara finally crawled out of the mesquite, her movements slow, uncertain. She kept her eyes on Silas, her small body tense. Silas took a deep breath. This was outside his usual routine. He walked back to Old Buck, Clara trailing a few steps behind him. He reached into the saddlebag, pulling out the swaddled bundle. Lily, the baby, was still whimpering. Clara gasped softly when she saw her sister, a tiny tremor running through her. "She's hungry," Silas muttered. He gently handed the baby to Clara, whose hands, surprisingly, knew exactly what to do. Her small fingers carefully adjusted the blanket, her gaze softening as she looked at her sister. A flicker of something other than fear crossed her face. It was a strange sight, this small, ragged child holding an even smaller one, out in the vast, empty prairie. Silas improvised. He found a clean cloth and some water in his canteen, dabbing at the baby's lips. Then he looked at Clara. "You hungry?" he asked. She nodded. He pulled out a piece of jerky. "It's tough," he warned. She took it with a shaky hand, tearing at it. They rode slowly towards the ranch house, Clara cradling Lily carefully, Silas's arm loosely around her for stability. The journey, usually solitary, was now punctuated by the baby's cries and Clara's silent watchfulness. He thought about the kind of person who would leave two children out in the middle of nowhere. It wasn't just abandonment, it was a death sentence. A cold rage, unfamiliar in its intensity, started to curdle in his gut. This was beyond unfair, this was depraved. The sun dipped below the horizon, but Silas barely noticed. His gaze was fixed on the two small figures huddled against him. The ranch house appeared, a dark silhouette. It wasn't much, but it was sturdy. It had been his sanctuary. Now it would be theirs. He dismounted stiffly, then helped Clara down, guiding her careful steps as she still held the baby close. They stepped onto the dry earth of his yard. The silence of the night, usually comforting, now felt heavy, pregnant with unspoken questions. Silas knew, with certainty, that his life had just taken a turn he could never have anticipated. He wouldn't be riding alone anymore. The first night in Silas Vance's quiet ranch house was clumsy. He knew how to handle a bucking bronco, but a wailing infant was a mystery. Lily cried, a thin, persistent sound. Silas tried everything: water, rocking, pacing. Clara, perched on a stool, watched him with wide, solemn eyes, offering soft comfort to her sister. She didn't cry, didn't complain, just watched. Around midnight, the baby finally quieted, exhausted. Clara slumped against the kitchen table. Silas covered her with an old blanket. He sat by the hearth, nursing lukewarm coffee. He watched the two small figures. Clara muttered something in her sleep. Silas leaned closer. Her eyelids fluttered. "Cain," she whispered, a thin thread of fear. He said. She fell silent. The name hit Silas like a branding iron. Cain Theron. The world felt colder. Cain Theron. The man who had, years ago, systematically undermined Silas's cattle venture, forged documents, and swindled him out of prime grazing land, pushing Silas to ruin. It was a wound that had never fully healed. Cain was a smooth talker with a venomous core. But children, abandoned children, it seemed too vile. Silas remembered faint rumors about Cain having a liaison with a young woman before he cleaned up his act and married into money. He'd dismissed them then. Now, a chill ran through him. He looked at Lily, then at Clara. Her features, though sharper, shared a subtle curve of the jaw, a particular set to the eyes, reminiscent of Cain. It was a terrifying realization. Cain had children, these children, and he had abandoned them. The cold anger that had settled in Silas's gut now solidified. This wasn't just about his lost land. This was about a cruelty so profound it twisted a man's soul. These innocent lives, discarded like trash, were a direct consequence of Cain's relentless ambition. Silas closed his eyes, the flickering firelight unable to warm the ice that had formed inside him. His quiet ranch now held the very proof of a fresh, horrifying betrayal. Days turned into weeks. Silas fell into a strange, new rhythm. He learned how to care for Lily. Clara, though still quiet, began to move more freely. She helped with chores, her small hands capable, her eyes starting to warm with cautious trust. In the evenings, Silas asked her small questions, trying to piece together their story without frightening her. Clara mentioned Mama, her voice soft. She spoke of a big dark man who sometimes visited, shouting. She talked about leaving that house at night, being told they were going somewhere special, then Mama got sick, and they were left alone. She didn't say Kane's name, but the description of the big dark man matched Silas's memory of Kane Theron. He kept his face neutral, absorbing every word. Silas also made discreet trips to town. He inquired about old acquaintances of Kane's, any rumors of disappearances. He heard that Kane Theron had indeed married into the prosperous Caldwell family, securing their banking interests and land holdings. No one seemed to remember a young woman or children disappearing. Kane had been thorough. Back at the ranch, Silas found heartbreaking pieces of evidence. In Clara's small satchel, she had clutched a tarnished silver locket with a faded photograph of a kind-faced woman, Clara's mama. There was also a small, crudely carved wooden bird that Clara kept tucked under her pillow, claiming Papa made it, Kane. Silas remembered, had a knack for carving small figures. These seemingly innocuous objects were now damning evidence, tying Kane directly to the children. The realization settled deep in Silas's bones. Kane had not only swindled him, but had thrown away his own flesh and blood to secure his status and wealth. The level of cold calculation, the utter lack of human decency, was sickening. Silas looked at Clara, carefully feeding Lily. He watched their innocent faces. A quiet, burning resolve hardened within him. This wasn't just about revenge for old wounds. This was about justice for lives discarded. He had to act. With the puzzle clear, Silas knew what he had to do. His quiet life shattered. A new purpose formed. He would see these children safe, and he would make sure Kane Theron answered for his monstrous deeds. This was a different kind of fight. He kept his intentions to himself, a silent promise to the children who now depended on him. He began by reinforcing his homestead. He repaired old fences, replaced a broken shutter, oiled hinges. He trained his 2 old ranch dogs, Buster and Belle, to be watchful. The ranch was becoming a small, fortified island, a sanctuary for the 2 vulnerable lives it now housed. Silas also started teaching Clara. He showed her how to draw water, feed chickens, gather eggs. He taught her to recognize tracks, read the wind, read the sky. He even showed her simple ways to identify medicinal herbs. He didn't push her, just guided her hands. Clara absorbed it all like dry earth drinking rain. She learned to ride a gentle pony, her small frame steady, her eyes bright with new confidence. He found a secluded hollow on his land, hidden by cottonwoods. Here, he showed Clara how to hide, how to remain unseen, and how to find her way back. "This is our secret," he told her. "Only we know this place." Clara, her face solemn, nodded. She understood the weight of his words. She began to call him Papa Silas sometimes, a soft sound that made something tight in Silas's chest loosen. His days, once predictable, were now rich with purpose. The cries of Lily, the quiet presence of Clara, transformed his empty home into something alive. The cold anger towards Kane was still there, tempered by a fierce protective love. He wasn't just reclaiming his honor, he was building a legacy, a family he never expected. He knew the fight ahead would be long, but looking at Clara, her spirit slowly blossoming, he knew he was ready. Kane Theron wasn't a man who took a polite refusal well. The subtle intimidations quickly turned brazen. A week after Silas's visit to Jebediah Miller, 2 rough-looking riders appeared on his property in broad daylight. They rode their horses hard across his grazing land, kicking up dust, churning the grass. They circled his main herd before turning towards the house. Clara, helping Silas feed the chickens, stiffened. Lily, playing near the porch, stopped her gurgling. Silas met them on the porch, his rifle casually resting in the crook of his arm. Its barrel glinted in the sun. His gaze was steady. The men pulled their horses to a halt 20 yards away. One, a burly man with a scar, spat tobacco. "Theron wants to know if you've changed your mind, old man," he rasped, "about that land." "No," Silas said, his voice flat. "The answer's still no." The man grinned, a nasty flash. "Might find things getting uncomfortable around here. Your fences ain't so strong, your cattle stray easy. Mine are strong enough for what needs doing, and my cattle know their way home." The standoff stretched. The man's grin faltered. He looked at Silas's eyes, then at the rifle, then at the 2 small figures half hidden behind Silas in the doorway. He swore and turned his horse. The 2 riders galloped off, leaving a plume of dust. Silas watched until they were specks on the horizon. He let out a long breath. That night, Silas heard sounds outside the house, a rustle, a faint creak. He grabbed his rifle, moving silently. He saw a shadowy figure near the barn. He fired a shot into the air, a warning. The figure cursed, then scrambled away. Silas spent the rest of the night on the porch, rifle across his knees, the dogs alert. The incidents, while frightening for Clara, forged a deeper trust. She knew Silas was her shield. The next morning, Silas rode into town. He went to the sheriff, calmly reported the fence cutting and the attempted rustling. He didn't mention Kane's name directly, but hinted at a powerful, new money figure. He spoke of his peace being disturbed. The sheriff promised to look into it. Silas knew it wouldn't be enough, but it laid a groundwork. He was quietly building a case. The test was coming, and he had to be ready. Silas knew the sheriff's looking into it would only go so far. Kane Theron, with his new money and connections, was largely untouchable. Silas needed to hit Kane where it hurt most, to expose him without putting Clara and Lily directly in danger. He needed to find a hidden path to justice, one that leveraged Kane's own past betrayals. He rode back to Jebediah Miller's dusty office. This time, Silas laid out more of the story. He spoke of Kane's old swindles, the forged documents, the land he'd lost. He showed Jeb the locket and the small wooden bird. He explained about the children and how he suspected Kane had abandoned them, how the incidents on his ranch began after their arrival. Jeb listened, his face growing grimmer. "Children, Silas?" Jeb said, rubbing his temples. "That's a different kind of evil." "Different, but connected," Silas replied. He wanted to clean his slate. They were in the way, just like my land. Jeb nodded. "Hard to prove the abandonment in court without Clara's testimony. That's risky. But the old land deal, that's where he left a trail." Kane was clever, but too greedy to be truly careful. Jeb pulled out old files, yellowed and brittle. There were whispers then, Silas, discrepancies, things overlooked because Kane had powerful friends, but I kept records, just in case. Silas watched as Jeb, with patience, sifted through faded deeds, old ledgers. He pointed out inconsistencies, a forged signature here, a misdated document there. It was intricate work, but Silas saw the deliberate deceit that had cost him so much. This was the opening. They wouldn't prove Kane abandoned his children directly in court, but they could prove Kane was a liar, a cheat, and a fraud who had ruined good men. Once that foundation crumbled, everything else might follow. "We go after his new money," Jeb declared, his eyes gleaming. "We hit his reputation, his standing with the Caldwells. We show them the snake they married into. Once he's exposed as a fraud, his new life, his respectability, it all comes tumbling down. Then, the truth about those children, it won't seem so impossible." Silas felt grim satisfaction. This was his path. A quiet legal war, fought with documents, aimed at the heart of Kane's deceit. It was a long game, but Silas was patient. The lawsuit hit the county like an unexpected dust storm. Vance versus Theron, allegations of fraud and unlawful acquisition. The small-town newspaper headlines were enough. Kane Theron, the man who had recently married into the esteemed Caldwell family, was openly accused of old swindles, forged documents, and bankrupting a reputable rancher. It was a scandal, slow-burning but potent. Silas, with Jebediah Miller as his quiet, relentless champion, presented his case with grim precision. He didn't speak with emotion. He simply laid out the facts. Dates, signatures, financial ledgers detailing Kane's deceit. Jeb had worked tirelessly, uncovering forgotten witnesses, subtle inconsistencies in property records that now screamed fraud. Silas sat in the courtroom, his face impassive, as the story of Kane's calculated betrayal unfolded. Kane tried to dismiss it as an old man's bitterness. He brought in high-priced, flashy lawyers who tried to discredit Silas. But Silas, weathered and stoic, simply stated the facts. He looked honest. He looked like a man who had suffered patiently and was now asking for justice. The contrast between Silas's quiet dignity and Kane's bluster was stark. The town watched. Whispers followed Kane. People who had once sought his favor now averted their eyes. His new Caldwell in-laws sat in the gallery, their faces increasingly pale. While the legal battle raged, Clara and Lily remained at the ranch, safe and largely unaware. But their existence with Silas was no longer a secret. Neighbors, initially curious about the children, had started to see Silas less as an odd recluse and more as a man who had taken in two lost souls. They'd seen Clara wave from the porch, Lily's giggles carried on the wind. The simple, undeniable truth of two innocent children thriving under Silas's care began to subtly undermine Kane's image. The public unmasking of Kane Theron's fraudulent past was not just a legal battle, it was a character assassination. As evidence mounted, confirming his ruthless ambition, a climate of suspicion grew. People began to wonder, if he could do this to Silas Vance, what else had he done? The seeds of doubt grew quickly. The very respectability Kane had desperately sought, for which he had discarded his children, was crumbling. His carefully constructed life was unraveling in the harsh light of public scrutiny. The legal proceedings dragged on for weeks, but the outcome became clear. Kane Theron's empire of lies was collapsing. The evidence Silas and Jebediah had unearthed was irrefutable. The old land fraud, the forged signatures, the financial manipulations, it all laid bare Kane's true character. The final ruling came down like a hammer blow. Kane was found guilty of multiple counts of fraud. He was ordered to pay Silas substantial damages, and his assets were frozen, his reputation shattered. His new wealthy in-laws publicly disavowed him. Kane Theron was a ruined man. His fortune was gone, his social standing obliterated, and he faced further investigations. The West, while rough, had a fierce sense of justice. Silas, sitting quietly in the courtroom, watched Kane's face crumple. There was no triumph in his own eyes, just a grim, quiet satisfaction that justice, however slow, had finally caught up. As Kane's public ruin became known, the unspoken truth about Clara and Lily began to echo through the town. People who had once dismissed rumors now put the pieces together. That respectable Mr. Theron, whose life was exposed as a lie, had children, 2 small girls, and those girls were now living with Silas Vance, the rancher who had just exposed Kane's deceit. A local newspaper, emboldened by the scandal, ran a follow-up story, detailing how Silas had taken in 2 displaced children. It didn't explicitly accuse Kane of abandonment, but the implication was clear. It spoke of Silas's quiet generosity. A reporter rode out to Silas's ranch. He saw Clara, a healthy, smiling girl, leading Lily by the hand. He saw Silas, a figure of strength and quiet care. The truth of Kane's depravity, once a dark secret, was now out in the open, spread by whispers and newspaper columns. Kane, despised and abandoned, eventually left the county, a broken man. He didn't flee under darkness, he simply faded, a shadow of the ambitious man he once was. His grand house went up for sale, his name a stain on the community's memory. Silas had delivered his revenge, not with violence, but with truth. He had stripped Kane of everything he held dear. In doing so, he secured his own vindication and a future for the 2 innocent lives Kane had cast aside. The battle was over, and the righteous had won. With Kane Theron's ignominious departure, a quiet calm settled over Silas's ranch. The tension that had coiled in his gut for months finally eased. His name, once connected to whispers of betrayal, was now synonymous with integrity. People in town, who once saw him as solitary, now looked at him with respect, a silent nod of acknowledgement. Some even offered help, bringing sacks of flour or offering a hand with fence repair. It was a subtle shift, but meaningful. The ranch, once a stark landscape of Silas's solitude, began to transform into a vibrant home. Money recovered from Kane's assets provided a comfortable cushion, allowing him to hire extra hands. He could invest in new breeding stock, repair older buildings, and ensure a secure future for Clara and Lily. He built a small addition onto the house, a brighter room for the girls, filling it with simple, handmade furniture. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs, a place of warmth and security. The legal adoption process, advised by Jebediah Miller, was quiet. With Kane gone and the children's abandonment undeniable, the court granted Silas full guardianship, Clara and Lily Vance. It sounded right. Silas Vance, the lonely rancher, was now a father. He found immense joy in this unexpected role. His days were still filled with ranch work, but now punctuated by Lily's delighted squeals as she chased chickens, or Clara's serious questions about crops. He taught them, he listened, and for the first time he felt a profound sense of purpose. He watched Clara grow, her cautious nature slowly replaced by quiet confidence. She absorbed everything, learning to ride, to mend, to understand the land with an intuition that sometimes surprised even Silas. Lily, with her infectious laughter, became the sunshine of the house, her small hand often finding Silas's rough one, a silent declaration of trust. The ranch was no longer just land and livelihood. It was a living testament to resilience, to one man's integrity, and to the profound truth that family could be found in unexpected ways. Silas often sat on his porch in the evenings, watching the last light fade from the sky, the sounds of his ranch, now full of young life, drifting softly on the wind. He sometimes thought of Cain, but the bitterness had faded, replaced by gratitude. Cain's cruelty had inadvertently brought him the greatest unexpected blessing of his life. His revenge was not just Cain's ruin, but the flourishing of a new future, built on the foundations of truth and love. Years spun by, like tumbleweeds across the endless Texas plains. The small girls Silas had found grew, shaped by the land and by the quiet, unwavering presence of the man who had given them a home. Clara, no longer the frightened shadow, blossomed into a sturdy, capable young woman. She moved with a purpose that mirrored Silas's own, her hands adept at handling livestock, her eyes sharp for any sign of trouble. She rode the ranch boundaries with him, often taking the lead. She helped manage the new hands, her voice clear and firm, her judgment sharp. Lily, the baby found in the saddlebag, had shed any trace of her traumatic beginning. She was a vibrant, cheerful child, her laughter echoing through the ranch house. She knew no other father than Silas, no other home than the sprawling, sun-baked ranch. She followed Silas like a shadow, asking endless questions, eager to learn everything. Silas, whose patience had once been reserved only for stubborn horses, found an endless supply for Lily's boundless curiosity. He taught her to read from old books he'd kept, and she devoured them. Silas, now well into his 60s, moved a little slower, but his spirit was full. The loneliness that had defined so much of his life was a distant memory. His ranch was no longer just his, but theirs. The house had seen additions, a new barn built, and the herd grown. It was a place of work, but also of laughter, shared meals, and quiet, comforting silences. He watched the two girls grow, their individual strengths emerging, their bond with each other fiercely strong. The story of the lonely rancher who found a baby in his saddlebag and rescued a frightened girl had become a quiet legend in the county. People remembered Cain Theron, but his name was now just a whisper of shame, a stark contrast to the enduring legacy Silas Vance was building. Silas had taught them not just about cattle and crops, but about resilience, about standing firm against injustice, and about the unexpected ways in which life could bring profound meaning. He saw the respect in the eyes of his neighbors, the gratitude in the faces of Clara and Lily, and he knew he had achieved something far greater than any revenge. The ranch flourished, a testament to hard work and true character. It was a place where lost things were found, where broken spirits were mended, and where an unexpected family had forged a life stronger than any betrayal. Silas would often sit on the porch in the evenings, watching Clara and Lily, their silhouettes against the setting sun. His quiet life, once so barren, was now rich with purpose, filled with the warmth of a family he had chosen, and who had chosen him. The final scene found Silas Vance, his hair now a thin silver thread, sitting on the wide, worn porch of his ranch house. Years had melted into seasons, and the ranch now hummed with a different kind of life. Beside him sat Clara, a woman now, with the strong hands of a rancher and the quiet wisdom of someone who had seen hardship. Across from them, Lily, a vibrant young woman, was reading aloud from a book, her voice carrying on the gentle evening breeze. The ranch was prosperous, a testament to their combined efforts. New fences stretched far, herds grazed on the rolling hills, and the barns were stout and full. But the true wealth wasn't in the land or the cattle, it was in the unspoken understanding that filled the air between them. Silas looked at Clara, then at Lily, a profound sense of peace settling in his heart. The sounds that had once startled him, the baby's cries, the girl's sobs, were now replaced by the gentle rhythm of their lives. Lily's cheerful chatter, Clara's calm directives, the lowing of cattle, the rustle of the wind through the mesquite. He picked up an old leather saddlebag that lay discarded near his feet, empty now, its purpose long served. His fingers traced the worn stitching. He remembered that day, the impossible discovery, the shock, the cold dread, and the quiet resolve that had been born from it. He thought of Kane Theron, a name that was now little more than a forgotten stain on the county's history. Kane's malice had been a catalyst, pushing Silas towards a destiny he could never have imagined. Lily closed her book, looking up, her eyes soft as she met Silas's gaze. "What are you thinking, Papa Silas?" she asked, her voice clear. Silas smiled, a slow, deep smile that reached his eyes. He didn't need to speak much anymore. He just shook his head slightly, a subtle gesture that meant everything. His gaze drifted to the distant cluster of mesquite trees where Clara had once hidden, weeping. The weeping was long gone, replaced by the sturdy resilience of the two women beside him. His revenge had not been a moment of retribution, but a lifetime of building, of nurturing, of proving that goodness, however quiet, could always triumph over malice. He leaned back, closing his eyes, listening to the familiar sounds of his home, now full and warm. The air smelled of dry earth and growing things. An unspoken promise hung in the twilight, a promise of enduring love, of an unexpected family, and a legacy built not on stolen land or discarded lives, but on the unwavering strength of a rancher's heart. The lonely rancher had found his purpose, and in doing so, had found his true home,